Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Table Talked. This week I have a really special conversation for you. I brought my friend Margaret on and she is incredible. She's an actor, storyteller, ttrpg enthusiast, fight choreographer, intimacy coordinator, lots of titles. She's also a queer woman, and we talk about her journey into playing D&D and how to make our tables more inclusive and inviting. Also, if you like Tabletop and want to hear more conversations, we want to give those to you, but it would really help us if you gave us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, hit the subscribe button, and told somebody you know would love the podcast. We're still in our early phases and we can use all the support we can get. Well, that's enough of me talking and babbling on. Here is the episode with our special guest, Margaret. All right, well, welcome, Margaret. I'm so glad that you're here to talk to me today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so we had a discussion a while ago about sort of the, I don't want to say like the male gaze of D&D, but just sort of like the...
I think you can say the male gaze
yeah,
of
I guess.
D&D.
Yeah, the male gaze of D&D and sort of the very like white cis nature of it. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of want to deep dive that because it's like a very interesting conversation, especially when it comes to running campaigns and being in them. Mm-hmm. It feels like that there are just so many of these like traps around for a DM that wants to do a good job, but then also just when it comes to being a player mm-hmm. in that sort of culture, like how that feels, because it's not super like it doesn't cater to anyone except for like the original
players. Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, for the record, since this is an audio medium, I suppose I'll just say that I am a cisgendered white woman, so that will color my views on this 100%. But I think for me, knowing the reputation of D&D was the reason I didn't play for so many years. I was like, people were like, oh, I love D&D. You want to join this campaign? And I was like, I'm good. Like, I have no interest in this whatsoever. I don't need to sit around with, 4 sweaty nerds in their mom's basement.
Yeah, exactly.
Chugging Mountain Dew.
Honestly, when I was in high school and I was trying to get my friends together to play, I also kind of ran into that a little bit where people were like, I'm not like that. Which,
look, I like reading and I like nerdy stuff, but D&D,
yeah, exactly. And I guess that there was, I mean, my mom had a totally different sort of like prejudice against it. She was like, Satan will come into your soul.
Yes, my ex's mom was the same way. She was very much like, you got to be careful with that stuff.
Yeah, for real. It's like the satanic panic never ended.
Truly.
But then, I was thinking about it too. I read a really great article. I've kind of mentioned it in previous episodes as well, but there was an article about how there was this Jewish man who loves D&D, mm-hmm. But he also was like, this is a very problematic game because a lot of the monsters and stuff are just ripped wholesale from different faiths.
Right, like golems and things like that.
And even like a lich, like a phylactery is mm-hmm. a like Jewish ceremonial piece in some like religious ceremonies and stuff. So it's like there's like stuff in there where you're not super, it's just not a great look, but so I guess I wanted to just turn it over to you and say like what has been your experience as like a woman, and if you don't mind me saying, a queer woman playing D&D?
It's a good question. I think the hardest hurdle was starting it all. And I feel like I had a lot of different perceptions about what kind of people played D&D, what sort of room that would be. And I think the only reason that I got as into it as I did was because I played with other creative people. I've only played with actors. I only ever want to play with actors.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a real spirit of the sort of yes and mm-hmm. in that room. And so if I come in and I say, I want to be a haggard old man with one tooth, who's still trying to relive his glory days in the arena, the whole team sort of goes, cool. And it's just, we move along. I've often been the only girl in my campaigns, the only woman. And because of the people I play with, it's been mostly a good experience. But I do think that there's, I don't know that there's an expectation that there'll be a romantic plot line, but it feels like it happens a lot.
Yeah.
Which, like, I'm open to sometimes if it's good storytelling.
Right.
But it doesn't seem like it's a compulsion that falls on other players.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? Even when they're playing, I play with guys who play female characters, but I just don't think the expectation is the same.
Yeah, and I think that there's sort of like the unseen sort of cultural prejudice of being an American playing. So maybe this is different wherever it's played or whatever, but I totally get that. Yeah, I don't know. It's just really strange because for me, in a weird way, it has been sort of instrumental for me being able to explore my sort of identity of different things. Like my original character, William or Bill Stabums.
Great name.
Obviously started as sort of a joke character, allowing me to sort of distance myself from D&D as I started to play. What does he do? He stabs people. Stabums. But yeah, and then throughout... it sort of just became that Bill was sort of like a pansexual confidence man who sort of like was very fluid in all ways. Yeah. And so it did allow me to explore sort of taking on an identity of somebody who was interested in many different, genders and like thoughts and identities, I guess. And so it's slowly shifted from me identifying as like a cis white man to sort of like a bisexual he person. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so like I think that it can be like super powerful in that way, but I do also agree that there's been times in campaigns where like I've either been listening to them or playing them and I'm just like, oh man, this is really tough. Like, are we going into a town that's like sort of inspired by some problematic thing in history that we have to deal with, and it's like we're kind of using this as a plot point, or like you said, is someone being pigeonholed based on what they have chosen to play, or like lots of different traps to fall into.
Yeah, and I think the lovely thing about exploring a character in D&D is that you do have that freedom to explore maybe a part of yourself that you're not as comfortable with or not aware of. And that's a lot of fun when you're playing with people from just all these different backgrounds and different gender and, sexual orientations and races and everything else. But I think when you're playing with a group that's largely the same, it turns into this sort of wish fulfillment, which if I'm in a group of guys playing this game and all of them want to fulfill the wish of being the strongest and smartest one in the room who gets all the girls, that's not an environment I'm interested in at all. I don't want to be there for that. So, it's an interesting line to toe of like, yes, exploring what you would want to be in an ideal world, but I think that means that you have to make sure that the group you're playing with, their version of their ideal self is good. That sounds rude, but you know what I mean.
I totally get what you mean, because I don't know, because it's also like in a good story structure, you can't be like Larry Stu wish fulfillment all the time. Like there has to be struggles, there has to be stuff, and if you are embodying somebody who you do not identify as, but also have no intention of trying to empathize with that experience, then I think you could get into a lot of trouble very quickly. Like if you are playing, like a female wizard who is, started as a noble and was going to be forced to be married off or whatever, and then like runs away and joins an adventuring party. Like if you are a straight man who does not value the struggle of like women in a patriarchal world, and so you kind of discount that, and it's like, oh man, my main struggle is that I can't get enough spells to kill all these people or whatever. Like I don't know, I just feel like it can kind of force the entire story into a direction where you're just like, is this all meaningless? And also, did we do kind of like a net harm to our understanding of things?
Well, I think that there's sort of a general issue inside of science fiction, inside of these created realities, Star Wars, etc., blah, blah, blah. Anything that we're going, okay, we're creating this world, where I feel like there's this tendency in a lot of white creators to sort of role play a suppressed class.
Yeah.
And I think that's really complicated.
Yeah.
You know,
for real.
Yeah. You see this, I think, all the time in classic media, right? Of people saying like, yes, but in this world, even though I'm a straight white person, I'm being oppressed. And like, that's really messy when you're doing something for entertainment. And I think we don't talk about that or explore that enough. And so I think heading that off by creating the parameters of your world is important. And I also think that, you know, not doing that and just jumping in and saying like, this is the role that I'm playing and I'm beholden to these people creates a hostile environment when you are trying to diversify a group. Like I wouldn't want to join that, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
If someone came up to me and they said, okay, in this world, the women have all the power and we men are subjugated in this way, that, and the other, I'd be like, okay, cool, bye.
Yeah, exactly. Like that, you have no power here. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's also interesting because it bleeds into the marketing of the product as well. And this is for like a lot of TTRPG stuff. And I think that actually Powered by the Apocalypse does it a little bit better than Wizard of the Coast. But like we were talking about how there's not a whole lot of good merch for D&D for women. Like the only shirt that we came across when we were
Are you talking about the D20s shirt?
Yeah.
Kill me.
Yeah, for the listeners' information, we're talking about a shirt that had 2 20s on it. It says, yes, they're natural.
Yeah.
Just, you know.
Why?
Come on, guys. Yeah, and I just think that, like, it's weird that we aren't still treating all genders and sexual orientations. And I think it's getting better, but we're not seeing them all as equal members of the community that is, you know, participating and purchasing and doing all the things that, you know, the white men have done as well. But we still cater to like a very specific idea of what people want for their merchandise, for their campaigns, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think, you know, in all arenas of life, I think we're having discussions about what diversifying means, what diversity means.
Yeah,
Sorry,
right.
I misspoke. And all of these sort of conversations about like, well, how do we make this group not all white or et cetera, et cetera? And it's like, well, what is your group doing? Like, are you making an environment that's uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Are you making one that's inclusive and safe? Like if your group is all white or all male or whatever, maybe just sort of think about what is the environment you're inviting people to join? Because if it's still hostile, then why would anyone want to join?
Yeah. I also think that it's really hard to, it's really hard to accept that just the fact that you present in a certain way can cause hostility without you meaning to. Like if you look at all the most famous actual play podcasts and stuff, most of them, if not all of them, definitely just the big ones that come to mind right now are like Dimension 20 and Critical Role and The Adventure Zone. All three of those are majority white and majority like, you know, the DMs are all men, that sort of thing. So like it's interesting, and like I know that all of those groups are like very open and conscious of these issues, but also is that already a hostile environment, you know?
Yeah, and I think the sort of rigorous rule structure of a lot of these games lends itself to a kind of pedantry that I think of as sort of anathema. I'm like, I don't want to go near the guy who's going, actually, you can't do that because you need a gem and you're, you know, this is a visual component spell as well. And you know, like, I like playing with a group. The group that I play with, we have sort of, we use the rules, we do, but
in sort of a loose sense.
Yeah, I think the thing is that we don't lose sight of the fact that the rules are to enable you to play a great game.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to be worried about the encumbrance, like the weight encumbrance on your character, then just don't use that rule.
Yeah.
And I think approaching it with a little bit more fluidity makes it a more fun and sort of easy to join thing.
Yeah, honestly, both as a player and as somebody who runs these games, I have never once tracked supply levels.
Oh, no.
Or like even like when it comes to currency and stuff, it's for me, I don't care. Like, it's like, oh, you find 500 gold. It's like, I don't care.
I know.
Someone else can hold on to that.
None of my campaign, we never do shopping trips on my campaign. It's just sort of like, if your DM wants you to find a cool thing, you'll find a cool thing.
Yeah, and actually in because I mainly run out of Powered by the Apocalypse and some other systems other than D&D, but even when I do D&D, it's usually when a character fails a roll badly or something happens where it's like, oh, you're in a bad spot, they'll be like, oh, you've run out of arrows or something like that as a way to be like, ooh, stakes are going up because you
here's your crit miss and here's your punishment.
So it becomes more of a storytelling tool in that way than a mark on a
which is the point, right? You'd
tell
a collaborative story.
I do think that there are two different kind of schools of thought here, because I also play with people who are like super into that, and it's more war gamey, and people who really like to like essentially within these rules. I guess it feels more empowering if you overcome something when there were such strict rules on you, because then you're like, I did it. Like, I was able to overcome this monster, even though I had to have like a gem worth 500 gold to cast that spell or whatever.
Yeah.
In fact, last night I played and we had a character's brain get sucked out through his eyes.
Fun.
And was dead, and we had to like get him back up, and someone was like, I have like Revivify, after we had dealt with all of the monsters. And in the spell description, it's like, you need all the parts to bring the person back.
All the components.
And so we had, basically it led to a moment where it's like, you have a minute to find this brain. Which was like a cool moment. And so like sometimes there are ways, like you said, where the rules can become, and these kind of guidelines can become a storytelling moment where you're like, oh boy, this is a real moment that we have to deal with.
100%. I get that. We had a game moment once where a beloved character died in the middle of a fight. And I think it was my character.
I don't know which of the characters were beloved,
but it was mine.
But it was me.
It was 100% me. No, we were running this very strange campaign where no one wanted to take on the full responsibility of DMing, and so we did a rotating DM by virtue of like, we had a family structure, and the family was cursed, so they would randomly turn into an animal every once in a while. And so whoever was the animal that week was the DM. Yeah. And we had this sort of collaborative storytelling model.
Yeah.
So I was the DM that week, and I did kill my own character for dramatic effect. But it was funny because the next session, I was like, I started out and I was like, okay, it's a week later, blah, 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 blah. And someone goes, I have Revivify. And I was like, cool, that only works a minute after someone's died. So,
whoops.
So like, I 100% agree. The rules can be wonderful storytelling devices. I think it's really just about mixing and matching to make the game that you want.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of players don't have that sort of flexibility. They're like, no, this is how you play D&D. And I'm like, well, there are a million ways to play D&D, because it's an expansive rule set, and why not tailor it to be the game you want?
Yeah. That actually, since we're kind of talking about rule sets and how to run these games in a more inclusive way too, I kind of wanted to talk about that, because I've been thinking about this a lot, because I am running a Weird West campaign, which is essentially like, it's the Wild West except orcs, monsters, elves, whatever you want in there. Specifically though, I just came upon the fact that like the Wild West had a lot of really fucked up stuff about it when it came to race politics, gender politics, economics.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And it was also, a time period which I don't want to enforce rules that I don't agree, like societal rules I don't agree with on my players. And so like my strategy was to be like, I'm going to make some of this allegorical. I'm going to make it so like that there are vampires, werewolves and stuff like that. And they're just people, but there's like a lot of tension between the like non-monster like folk in town, and even between the monster folk, just because they're all different and like none of them are, quite,
quite easy. They all have like an uneasy truce, essentially.
Sure, yeah.
And so I basically just was like, and this is so far into the future that it's like the past again. So you know, I just kind of tried to sidestep a lot of that and just made like a different political situation for my characters. But even then, sometimes I'm like, man, am I doing a disservice by even, you know, offering something that could be interpreted as like, oh, like racially diverse people are monsters or whatever? And it's like, no, no, it's just, we're just not dealing with that. We're just going to put all of that away. And then I'm like, is that doing a disservice as well to just kind of take it away? So like, I would love to hear your thoughts on it.
Oh God, yeah. That's really complicated. I think what I was thinking of when you were saying this is I was thinking about, this sounds like a real non sequitur, but stick with me. I was thinking about Schitt's Creek and the retrospective that they did talking about how the show dealt with David's sexuality and how impactful that show has been for queer audience members, because they sort of had this moment of like, okay, well, you know, he's queer and he's in this small town. Yeah. And so how are we going to deal with that? And then going, well, why don't we just decide that the town's cool with it and it doesn't matter, because this is a world that we are creating. Yeah. So I think, you know, remembering that this is fantasy, right? Like the rules that govern our lives don't have to apply here. And so taking some creative license and saying, I don't like that, that makes me feel gross, means then you don't have to do it, you know? And I think that's important to keep in mind, because I cannot count the number of times. So I'm going to alienate half of your listeners. Are you ready?
I'm so ready.
Okay. I have beef with Game of Thrones.
Okay.
And specifically because of its treatment of women.
I imagine that you are the only one who does.
Yeah, the only one. Yeah, it's perfect. I'm just cranky. No, I have a serious issue with its treatment of women, and oftentimes when I would cite this as a reason that I did not want to continue watching the show, people would be like, well, yeah, but you know, that is the way that women were treated. It's historically accurate. Sure. And I'm like, there are dragons, Paul. Like, don't talk to me.
Are they historically accurate?
Yeah, don't talk to me about historical accuracy in your fantasy world.
Yeah, it's like you don't. Yeah, I think that sometimes that the like time period piece of fantasy, it's like because it's medieval sort of fantasy that I have to like perpetuate misogyny and all this kind of stuff. And it's
you don't.
You said, like what. When in Europe did they have to deal with trolls? You know, like this is not a thing that you need to keep going with. You can choose to make a difference.
Stretch your imagination, make a new society. Like the point for me, okay, so I know everybody plays for different reasons. For me, the point is fun, obviously, but also like collaborative storytelling. And I want to tell a good story, and I will always make the choice that makes sense for my character and that I think will be funny. Yeah. So, you know, whereas I think a lot of people are sort of caught up in, I don't know, being cool or doing it right and having the hero move. I think it's more interesting when characters fail. And I often try to create a character with serious flaws. So if I roll a 2 or a 1 or whatever, I can sort of go, yeah, magic's not under control yet. Or, you know, Tammy, I played a character called Tammy DeFay who was she was an elf cleric.
Based on Tammy Faye, like the
kind of, she was, she was an evangelical, for the god of light. Very you know, fun. Like I was a light cleric, so everything was just sort of like, if you buy my book, I swear you'll be on the right path.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
You know, so, you know, Tammy had numerous flaws, not least of which was that she was not a true believer. So like, I think, and I think, you know, when this gets too masculine or too wrapped up in this wish fulfillment, that goes out the window, and then you can't have fun when your character fails. You just get mad. I don't like that.
I actually this is maybe this is a reveal of a character that I might play someday, but I had a great idea for a character. I would call him Ronnie Devilman, because my naming scheme is very firm. That's the only rule I follow. And essentially he's a super nice guy, like alignment kind of good and like lawful, all that kind of stuff. He just kind of got caught up in a pyramid scheme where
Yes.
he has signed away his soul and he needs to get other people to sign away their souls.
Is he a warlock?
Yeah, he's a
Yeah,
warlock.
perfect.
He's a, like archfiend, sort of like, and basically he's like, I don't want you to have to sell your soul,
Yeah.
but like I need other people under me to like get rid of my debts in
Yes.
this, like, selling the knives kind of thing. And I just think that, like you said, making a character that's just full of flaws is way more fun.
Yeah.
I just recently started playing a game at work with some folks, and I just did a rolling scheme, and the intelligence was a 6.
Love that. Yes.
And like a lot of people would be like, oh, can I re-roll or whatever? But I also got like a 20 strength and like a good, constitution. I was like, no, this is perfect. And so like, I think that like you said, trying to play for the hero move is not always the best.
Yeah, it's a recipe for disaster.
It is, because people can get really sad really fast when they're not a hero,
I know. This makes me think of something, so I'm just going to segue quickly.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think that one of the other reasons that it's hard to come into a game system that has traditionally been sort of cis, white, and male is that the rolling, while fun and while, interesting if you're sort of going this route of creating flawed characters, does strip some agency away from your decision making if you're playing with the wrong DM or with the wrong group, because I think making someone roll for something, you want to pick your moments right, because if the moment is I seduce this fellow player
It's
or
like,
whatever it is,
don't
it's
roll
like,
for that.
how about we just carry out that fiction and I tell you to go fuck yourself? You know what I mean? Like, don't roll for charisma. Don't do this, that, or the other. Just like let it bear out, or better yet, don't propose that.
Yeah.
And I think keeping the rolling for like NPCs and for skill checks that are not peer to peer is a better way to play, because I don't want to relinquish that sort of choice for my character of whether your suave wit worked or not. Like, I want to make a choice here. Yeah.
And I also think that, and this is sort of building on what you just said, and also going back to the hero moment stuff, is that what we tend to think of a heroic character is like very based in masculine values.
100%. And hero's journey is built in.
Totally. And so it sometimes can lead you, if you're just trying to pursue that fantasy of being a huge misogynist dick. And so like, I don't know, like when it comes to like DMing, I just think it would be just like a base level interesting thing to do is to hold up more classically considered feminine values, like, considering others' safety and, emotional intelligence and like all of those things. If you as a DM like really raise up the importance of those things in your campaign, you can automatically make more people feel included.
Yeah. I mean, what you choose to prioritize as checks can change the tenor of a game, I think. For
sure.
Because, I've created characters knowing I'm playing with a group that's, we're going to be doing a lot of dex and a lot of charisma. And so I put, my skills there, and I'm like, who's ever going to make me roll survival? And then this arc I'm playing right now. Yeah. I don't know why I'm talking about it like it's the Adventure Zone. But this campaign I'm playing right now, I had to roll survival like 10 times in the first game, because my character was this crazy old man abandoned in a forest. And it's, I think, interesting to note as a DM how much value you're placing on which skills. Yeah. How often they're encountered.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And man, I actually, throughout this conversation, I'm just like, I gotta get you on. I need to run another game for you, like a Monster of the Week game or Urban Shadows.
I would love to. I haven't played Monster of the Week, but I'm very interested in it.
The thing that I love about those that are very fun, and I think that really align with your values and the values that we've been talking about, is that when you fail rolls, it's never like you don't do the thing you're going to do. It's more like that I, as the person who runs the game, do not have any storytelling power until you don't roll well. And then I get to add details.
That's cool.
So it's more like if a monster's running after you and you like turn around to shoot at it or whatever and you really fuck up, then I get to be like, I get to tell how this ends. And so I can be like, you like go to shoot and you realize, like we talked about earlier, and you realize the gun is jammed. And like that monster is like right on top of you now. What do you do? And so you just keep ratcheting up stakes. And then if like people just keep rolling bad, then it's a bad day for your character and you start having real punishments. But I just love the idea that narrative power can also be like a way to level out these kind of problems where you're like, if you're a DM and you're talking about something you don't know a whole lot about, maybe look around the group. And if there's someone who tells or like is able to tell that perspective a little better, you'd be like, what do you see in this room or whatever, and you give them a little bit more narrative weight so that you're not digging yourself into a problematic hole.
Yeah. I think the best experiences that I've had with D&D are with, sorry, pardon me for always defaulting. It's the one
totally fine.
I've
it's
played.
The most popular one.
Yeah. But the most fun I've had with that are with DMs who are really flexible. Like they don't come in with nothing prepared, but they come in knowing that their characters are going to make decisions which are going to alter the story.
Sure.
And they're receptive to that. And that sounds very basic, but I don't think it is. I think actually taking into consideration what your players want and how they might solve an issue is really important.
Yeah.
I don't want a formless session, but I want to not feel shoehorned into anything.
Yeah. What do you have to think about when you're offering a moral or a value choice in a game, or you're offered one as a player or something? Like, is there ever a way to make that feel comfortable, I guess? Because like there is
How do you mean? Like, what
so
kind
I'll
of a
give you an
choice?
example. There's a Waterdeep campaign that I played, and it's written into the book that in the Dungeon of the Mad Mage under the city, that they're on a certain level is just sort of like a goblin like city that traffics in, essentially sentient beings. Like they basically catch people and they catch like creatures that are able to talk and stuff, and then they sell them to other people. Yeah. And it's like, it's just like always feels a little weird if you're gonna deal with that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, obviously these are goblins and they're not good things, and you want to have the ability to destroy or to try to have the fantasy of being able to put to stop this moral wrong. But then, like you said earlier, there is a part of my brain that's like, but this doesn't have to exist. And like, I don't know, it's just hard because there's like, when you are offering up evil in a world, how do you do it without, digging yourself into a little bit of a pit?
Yeah. It's a good question. First off, I never played the books, so that helps me avoid that conundrum. But I think in the last few campaigns that I have specifically played, the figure of evil has more closely resembled what I imagine in a real world situation to be the figure of evil. Yeah. Meaning that it's this sort of wealthy, powerful shadow shit with people who are high standing members of society or whatever it is. So reframing what that evil looks like, I think for me is valuable. I don't know if that's a satisfying answer to that question.
I think that it kind of sparks something in my brain. Like, you know how they say in comedy that you should always punch up?
It's that. Yeah. It's 100% that.
It does feel that way.
Yeah, that's what I always try to do. And that I don't, I think we have a lot of these sort of light versus dark narratives that are steeped in
which honestly,
racism and misogyny. And so I'm just like, well, how about we don't do that? How about we do the opposite?
Yeah, I think that also absolutely no qualms if you're like just starting out as a storyteller or whatever, and a lot of your stories do have like very stark like good and bad because it's easier to write and it's like all that kind of stuff. But like you said, it can lead to problems, and it's based on values, and it kind of Tolkienizes in the way of like J.R.R. Tolkien what like real world struggles into like fantasy tropes or whatever. And it can be a little bit problematic, and also it's way more interesting to live in a gray area of like something is bad, but not for like, wow, you're the Dark Lord that is going to end the world.
Yeah.
It could be like you said, like maybe this person is, just an uncaring figure.
Monster.
Yeah, that is just, taking resources and it's just like bootstrap it or whatever.
Yeah.
And as a group, you have to, wrestle with ideals that are a little bit more vague, I guess.
Yeah. I do think too, the campaign I'm currently in is doing something smart, which is that I think the force of evil in our campaign, it's early days yet, so I could be wrong, but it seems like they are persecuting someone for what they do rather than for what they intrinsically are.
Yeah.
And I think that helps avoid the issue, or rather create a compelling narrative without relying on a problematic trope.
Yeah. And I mean, built into a lot of these games, there's some stuff that's weird, like, races in D&D can be a little, problematic with, certain races inherently being smarter or faster or whatever. It's kind of eugenics-y. And they're starting to like remove all of that from the game, which some people have problems with. I don't. And just making it more of a feat-based system, which I think is interesting.
I like that.
Yeah, I think that you can, like you said, you should center values, not identities.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a quick way to create a system that doesn't feel gross.
Yeah. Well, Margaret, thank you so much for coming on and talking.
Thank you for having me. And it was a pleasure to chat with you.
Is there anything you want to leave people with? Either you can plug something. I know that you are a stage combat, both teacher and choreographer, all that kind of stuff. If you're in the Boston area, get at Margaret.
Thank you.
Actually, if you're in the Boston area, Margaret.
That's very kind.
But otherwise, is there anything you want to, say at the end here?
I think just remember you can create the game you want to play. And if you haven't played, because you're worried about what that group is, play with your friends, play with the people you love. You can learn the rules. You don't need an expert to guide you through. Yeah. Especially now, I think D&D Beyond has a very user-friendly site.
For real.
It will help you tremendously in character creation. This isn't a secret tome anymore that you have to know all the ins and outs of. It's
the gatekeepers have been very much
they've been beaten back a bit.
A little bit. Yeah. And I also think that if you are having trouble being vulnerable in a group, maybe you don't have the opportunity to play with like close friends or something. That what I did with Bill was that I would, for the first like year and a half, I was like, Bill does this, Bill does whatever, and just made it all third person, and that allows you to keep a little bit of separation while still telling a fun story. Like I was like, Bill is sobbing right now.
I love an accent for the same reason. I'm like, there's no mistaking me for my character Finn the Brick Tara because he's Irish as can be.
Yeah. I think that those are some fun little tips and tricks to leave folks with.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Margaret.
No problem. Happy to be here.
Bye.
Well, everyone, that was my conversation with Margaret. I just want to thank her again for coming on the podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, again, please give us a rating or a comment in Apple Podcasts. If you like us, throw a 5-star rating on there. And you can always get in touch with us at Tabletop on Twitter or send us an email at tabletopodcast@gmail.com. We will read everything you send us, and we're going to make sure that if a lot of questions start coming in about topics that you want to hear us cover and questions for us and the other DMs that are on the show, we're going to answer those and make some programming to cater to it. So if you are interested, I highly encourage you to send it out to us. We read everything. All right. Thanks so much, everyone, and I'll see you next week for a bonus episode of Tabletop. Bye.